I'm really excited to make this week's video blog, and on Sunday, actually last weekend on Good Friday, and then at our sunrise service, and then on Easter morning we had absolutely fantastic time. Between those three services, we had 250 people in attendance between all three of those services, which was absolutely amazing to me. And on Easter, I had said that I was going to do this week's video blog on 10 reasons to believe that Christ rose from the dead, or 10 reasons to believe in the resurrection. And I didn't have time to give all of those on Easter, and I was so excited about what I got to preach on Good Friday, Sunrise, and Easter, but I couldn't fit everything I wanted to say in. And I can't actually fit it in today's blog either, but I'm going to do my best. So I'm going to go real quick, and I'm going to give you 10 reasons to believe that Christ rose from the dead. People only doubt that Jesus rose from the dead because they have never seen someone rise from the dead before. Our experience is overwhelming that people don't rise from the dead. But when you have an experience in Christ, and when you look at the evidence, you find that there's overwhelming proof that Jesus did rise from the dead. So let me look at 10 reasons. Number one, in reasons that to believe that Christ rose from the dead. The public execution was by Roman soldiers, and this assured Jesus' death. The public death was by Roman soldiers, and this assured Jesus' death. Some people said that Jesus rose from the tomb because he wasn't actually dead yet. He didn't actually die on the cross, so when they put him in the tomb, he woke up. He was just passed out. And the reason that this really can't be true is the fact that Jesus was publicly beaten. It wasn't a private kind of thing where people didn't see what happened. He was publicly beaten, and he was publicly flogged, which is the most extreme torture that the Romans did, especially against non-citizens. And they would beat them with a cat of nine tails. They would shred their skin and their back. Many of them, their organs would be exposed, and they would actually die just during the flogging. And if they lived through the flogging and they went to the crucifixion, that would finish them off. And so Jesus was publicly executed. He was publicly put on the cross so everyone could see. Everyone was there. Everyone saw the state that he was in, and they knew that he died. And Jesus was also firsthand, people saw that Jesus was run through with a spear in his side, with blood and water that flowed out, proving that his heart had already stopped, and that he was dead. He was also beaten by professional Roman soldiers who were professional executionists. So they wouldn't mess up what they were doing, especially because the only reason that Pilate had Jesus executed was because he was afraid of the Jewish riot that might happen, and he wanted to keep peace. And so he would be sure to make sure that they didn't botch this assignment, and they would be afraid that they'd be put to death if they had failed their assignment. So they made sure that Jesus was dead, and it was out in public. Everybody saw it. Everybody witnessed it. They knew that it was true. Number two reason that you can believe in the Jesus rose from the dead is that Roman soldiers guarded the tomb. So after they put the dead body of Jesus in the tomb, it was guarded by Roman soldiers. The Jews were afraid that Jesus would claim, that Jesus' disciples would claim that he rose from the dead because he had claimed that he was going to, and they made that very clear. So what happened was they were afraid of that, so they asked Pilate to guard the tomb. So Pilate sent Roman soldiers to guard the tomb to make sure that the disciples didn't try to steal the body. And so Roman soldiers were placed there to guard that tomb, and so anybody that even thought about stealing it would have thought twice, because you don't want to mess with Roman soldiers. And the penalty for falling asleep for the Roman soldiers would have been death, and so there's no way they wouldn't have taken this assignment serious. Number three reason that we should believe in the resurrection is that the grave was found empty in spite of the guards. In spite of the guards, the grave was found empty. The morning after morning after the Sabbath, some of Jesus' followers came to the grave, and they wanted to anoint his body, and they came and they wondered who's going to roll the stone away. I preached about that on sunrise service, but when they got there, they found that the huge stone had already been rolled away from the entrance. Matthew 28 says there was a great earthquake, and an angel rolled the stone away, and it was bright like lightning, and it says the guards froze in fear. And then they ran off and they told the Jewish leaders what happened, and the Jewish leaders paid them great amounts of money to lie and to say that this story never happened, that the disciples came and stole the body. Don't tell anybody an angel rolled the stone away. Don't tell anybody that Jesus is alive and was resurrected from the grave. Number 4 reason is that people claim to see Jesus alive after he was buried. And so the Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 15 that Jesus was seen alive by Peter and the 12 disciples and over 500 other people. So there was this 500 people running around saying, we saw Jesus alive. That's some pretty overwhelming testimony. That is impressive evidence. So by making this bold statement, by the Apostle Paul writing this down, and by all these people walking around saying, we saw the Lord risen, them all being alive at the time, making this public statement, anyone that was a critic of the fact that Jesus rose again had time to check out the evidence for themselves, ask those eyewitnesses, and be convinced whether it was true or not. And anyone that was an opposer and wanted to refute it had that chance also to say, no, here's why they're lying, and we can prove it. But in that moment, Christianity grew like crazy, which means that people believed the evidence, they believed the experience, and they believed the evidence that Jesus had risen from the dead, and they believed those eyewitnesses that told them it was true. Number 5, his apostles were drastically and permanently changed. His apostles were drastically and permanently changed. After Judas betrayed Jesus, and Jesus was arrested, all the disciples split. They ran, they hid. Peter even denied Jesus during his trial. They were like a whole group of cowards. But after meeting the resurrected Messiah, they were no longer cowards. They were on fire and passionate for the message. They went from being pansies to being bold and courageous. They went from just being total cowards to being the most heroic gospel preachers in all of history. Why? Because they'd come face to face with the resurrected Messiah. They saw Jesus and they believed, and they knew that no matter what, they were going to preach his gospel, and they were going to change the world. Number 6, the disciples didn't change their story. The disciples didn't change their story. Do you know how hard it is to keep a lie together? If Jesus hadn't actually risen, and the disciples were telling a lie when they were pressured, when they were beaten, when they were imprisoned, when they were stoned, when they were arrested, and even crucified, don't you think they would admit that they were telling a lie? Why would you die for a lie? Nobody would die for a lie. But they believed, and they never changed their story. They held that story together. No one said, you know what, we all decided we were going to lie about this because we didn't want to look stupid. No, instead, they were dying for the truth, and they kept their story together because why? Because it was the truth. Because Jesus had risen from the dead. Reason number 7, to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. It's clearly predicted in the Old Testament. Clearly predicted in the Old Testament. The Old Testament has prophetic events that portray Jesus' betrayal, his burial, his crucifixion, his resurrection. They're all prophesied in the Old Testament. The odds of one person fulfilling all these Old Testament prophecies just simply isn't possible. But Jesus did because God orchestrated it, and he brought the whole event together. Number 8, it was the message that changed the world. It was the message that changed the world. Time changed from BC, before Christ, to AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. It changed how people treated one another. It changed the love and kindness that people showed to one another, to the unfortunate. Atrocious things have been done in the name of Christianity, and that's wrong. And it wasn't done by people that were actually showing the love of Jesus, but an overwhelming amount of kindness, grace, acceptance, care for the needy, for the poor, for the sick, hospitals being made, schools being started, has been done in the name of Christ. Because it's a message that changed the world. Because God loved us, so we should love one another. Number 9, reason that we should believe that Christ rose from the dead is It fits the experience of those who trust him. On Sunday morning, I shared 1 Corinthians 1:18 says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God." And here's the deal. If you don't believe, the story's crazy. Nobody could rise from the dead. But if you do believe, you find out that it's the very power of God. The message of the cross, the message of Jesus' resurrection, fits the experience of those who trust in him. When you put your faith in him, you find out that, wow, that's the best thing I ever did. It changed my life. It changed my hope. It changed my future. Something within me that was missing is now complete. And wow, this story, not only am I glad that I looked at the evidence and made the tough decision, but now that I made the tough decision, man, I'm experiencing something supernatural, something beyond what I had ever experienced before. And the number 10 reason, Nancy told me on Sunday that this better be my number 1 reason. I decided to make it my number 10 reason to see whether she actually watches this and gets to the end. But so if you do, text me or call me and let me know. If you do watch it, number 10 reason is this: because of my family, because of my wife, because of my children. And at first when she told me this better be my reason, I'm like, okay, it's not in my top 10, but it became in my top 10, and here's why. Every baby is a miracle. You know what? When my first son was born, I'm like, it's not gonna happen. And he came out alive. It was a miracle. When my second son happened, I'm like, wow, that was absolutely a miracle. I can't believe this baby has been born alive. I didn't think it was possible. And then when my daughter was born, I'm like, it's not going to happen. Oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. It was a miracle. She was born. And then my last son, when he was born, I'm like, it's a miracle. Unbelievable miracle. Every baby is a miracle. Every marriage. The fact that God could give me a wife and that we could love each other and get along the way we do, it's a miracle. Simply a miracle. Every blessing that you have is a miracle. And to believe in the resurrection is just simply to believe one of the many miracles that God has given us. If you can believe in life, if you can believe in marriage, if you can believe in all of those simple everyday miracles that are happening around you all the time, it's not far-fetched to believe in the resurrection. We serve a God with supernatural abilities, and if he can do all these other little miracles around us, certainly he could raise his son Jesus from the dead. It's not a miracle that's too far to believe. We just have never seen it otherwise. So we think, wow, that's a lot. But no, you're living a life of miracles, and our supernatural God is able to do beyond what we can imagine. Faith is just to recognize that he is that God and say, wow, my Lord and my God. It is so true. So, you know what? It's intelligent to believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. All the evidence points to it. And if you would take a step of faith and say, God, I want to trust you, then the message of the cross will no longer be foolishness, but it will be the power of God unto salvation for you. So I challenge you today to believe, to give God a try, to give him your all, and discover how amazing it is to live the Christian life. God bless you. Thank you for listening today. I hope to see you in church on Sunday at Living Proof Church. God bless you.